Wrap me in a bolt of lightning, send me on my way still smiling. Maybe that's the way I should go, straight into the mouth of the unknown. I left the spare key on the table, I never really thought I'd be able to say I merely visit on the weekends. I lost my whole life and a different. I've said it so many times.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined by the one and only Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field West. It's Friday, our final show of the week, as Packers-Seahawks, the NFC Divisional Playoff, Sunday, 5:40 p.m. Central Time kickoff at Lambeau Field, is almost upon us, and we will definitely get to our end-of-the-week keys to victory a little bit later. But I want to touch on a couple of other subjects first. One, we've spent a lot of this week talking about the young guys on this Packers roster who are going to be making their playoff debuts and the messages they've gotten from the veteran players about how to handle the emotions, about how to just have the right perspective coming into a new situation, so to speak. But we've also heard from these same veterans talking about guys like Aaron Rodgers and Brian Bulaga and Tramon Williams about how special this opportunity here is, where the Packers went 13-3, got a first-round bye. You've put yourself 2 games from a Super Bowl. You're getting at least one of those here at home against the Seattle Seahawks. And they really do have an appreciation for just how special this chance is, and they don't want to let it go.
And I love the fact that I wrote about this on Packers.com for one of our stories this week. What I love is they all have 3 very different stories when you look at Rodgers, Bulaga, and Tramon Williams.
Yeah.
Starting off with Tramon, this is a guy that left for 5 years. We talked so much about the NFC Championship game and how that game ended, and it's funny, he was asked the question again this week if that moment sticks with him, the end of that game sticks with him at all. He said it doesn't stick with me at all. Because if you understand anything about Tramon Williams, one, he's played over 200 NFL games at this point.
Yeah.
But more than that, I mean, he went and had another career, basically. He went and was in Cleveland for 2 years. He was in Arizona after it almost looked like maybe that was going to be the end.
Yeah,
after Cleveland
yeah, he might
cut
be
him.
on his way out.
And he comes back to Green Bay, and it's been 2 seasons with Green Bay, and now he's back in the postseason. And he said this week that it's an opportunity not just to avenge something from 2014, but it's giving him a chance to write a different ending to his time in Green Bay. That means the world to him. It means for him to be 36 years old and still playing at the high level that he is. That's an incredible accomplishment. Bulaga, here's a guy that was the youngest player in NFL history to start a Super Bowl at 21 years old and 9 months or whatever it was at right tackle. And now here he is in year 10, one of the most veteran players on this team, and getting a chance to get back into a run. And I remember asking him this after Minnesota, and the question was asked again of him this week, what that 2 years, how you just appreciate things a little bit more when you've gone to the playoffs 7 years in a row or whatever it was, and then suddenly you don't go for 2 years. That's an incredible thing to be able to have this opportunity again. And it really speaks to him and his leadership and how he's approached this thing to be able to do it.
Interesting slip of the tongue you had there, saying Miami instead of Minnesota, by the way. I just thought I'd throw that in.
There's a little bit of it's a little bit of a Freudian slip. Remember that one if things go that way in a couple weeks here.
Yeah. Well, and with regard to Aaron Rodgers, too, he had some very interesting comments at his locker after Wednesday's practice, and one of those that obviously stood out was he was asked about, here, been out of the playoffs for a couple years. You're back in the postseason, a chance to get to a second Super Bowl. Everybody talks about the legacy and all that, especially with a guy who's built a Hall of Fame career to this point. And he was asked, well, how much is that second Super Bowl, a second championship, on your mind? And he said, it's on my mind every day. I mean, and he was just being honest. Now, in saying that, he's not saying it's like an overwhelming thought or anything like that. Like it's not a burden, or it doesn't drag him down, so to speak. But it just speaks to when an opportunity like this comes along, how much that is top of mind for a player like Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he knows as well as anybody that a second Super Bowl as a quarterback puts you in a different category from so many other quarterbacks who have that ring, and he's obviously got one. He's looking for number two, and he knows this is a different team. He hasn't had to be MVP quarterback Aaron Rodgers for the Packers to go 13-3. And he's also been fine with that. When he talks about accepting the roles and everything, he's done that himself as well. Now, that being said, we all know if Aaron Rodgers can find a little bit of that MVP magic that we saw back in 2011, back in 2014, seasons like that, that could go a long way here for the Packers in the month of January, and we'll just have to see if he can summon it, because he could make this really special.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and so many points that you make there are incredibly valid and true. And I go back to a couple things with Rodgers, because when you cover this team long enough, you remember Aaron Rodgers at 29 years old. Certainly, you remember him at 27 when he won a Super Bowl, and the perspective that those years have given him. I always. It's funny because we talk so much about beast mode, right, with Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah.
There's a Zen mode with Aaron Rodgers that I've noticed over the years. And more often than not, when he's in that kind of really deep reflection, he starts playing some of his best ball. And I think it's just that overall awareness, and he's not going to get too high or too low. He's going to understand what's in front of him and what the team must accomplish to get to their goals. And he's very in tune with the fact that 2 more wins here gets him back to a Super Bowl, gets this team back to a Super Bowl, and a chance to compete for the biggest prize of them all. So they're not really too concerned right now what's happened or what the stats are. As Rodgers said, at this point in your career, when you get to my age and when you're sitting in this chair, you just want to win championships. That's the thing that he's looking to put up on the shelf right now, and he has a great opportunity to do it with this roster. You've heard him, and it was right there. He was sitting next to Larry McCarron in the studio a couple days ago, outlining this year and what has made this team special.
Yeah.
Rodgers has said countless times, this is one of the most fun seasons he's had, just based on the way that this team has come together, whether it was your Mercedes Lewis's or your Alan Lazards who come out of nowhere to become a big part of this roster. Those relationships and personalities, that really goes a long way for a football team. And realistically, Mike, all it takes is one game to find your stroke, to find where you are and what you want to do. And I get this feeling going into this game that we're just going to see the best version of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, well, that would really be something, because as we've talked about, the Packers defense kind of reestablishing itself down the stretch, the special teams finding a return game late in the season. The Packers offense, as I wrote about last week, has been on the verge so many times in the last month, crossing the 50-yard line but not coming away with points. Been on the verge of putting up so many more points on the board that if they can take that extra step, that's what you're looking for from this Packers offense in the month of January.
In the big line that Rodgers said, it was to Larry, is that whatever it takes, I'm willing to do for this team to win. And I'm not saying that's going to go on a T-shirt or end up above his locker in seashells or anything like Relax did, but that is this team. It's whatever it takes to get that win, and they've done it all season long. This is a supreme test that they have on Sunday. Seattle's won a lot of the games a very similar way, but there's a confidence there when you've done it the way they've done it all year that, you know what, we can do it again.
Yeah, well, one other topic I want to touch on before we get to keys to victory, and I promise that we will get there. But in the midst of all of the playoff hoopla this week and the divisional game being here in Green Bay and on the horizon, first time in 5 years the Packers are hosting this round of the playoffs, we've actually neglected to discuss another big piece of news, which is that former Packers head coach Mike McCarthy has been hired by Jerry Jones to coach the Dallas Cowboys, and a move that seemed to happen very quickly. Over the weekend, and then was announced a little bit earlier this week and made official by Dallas and Mike McCarthy getting a 5-year contract. First of all, congratulations. Hats off to Mike McCarthy. I wish him well. I'm really glad he's getting another opportunity to coach in the NFL. I think we knew that this would happen, and I'm really, really interested to to watch him work from afar with a team that's in good shape, a roster that's in very good shape, and the expectations to move forward quickly are there. What are your thoughts on McCarthy landing the job in Dallas?
Without a shadow of a doubt, he landed the best the opening in terms of the coaching position.
No question about it.
I think when you walk into a situation, much like Matt LaFleur did last year, where you have the quarterback in place and you have the running back in place and a lot of talent around those two players, good things can happen. And I think you can even see and just listen to him talk at his news conference how energized he is to work with a young quarterback, again, like Dak Prescott, in trying to help him, ascend to that next level that I think a lot of people feel like he has that potential to actually accomplish. And then for him, he was here for as long as he was and accomplished so much in Green Bay. And I think as years wear on, more and more people will appreciate those accomplishments because there was a lot of winning that happened in the 2010s, and McCarthy had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
For him to get another chance with another iconic franchise, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for him and their family. You could tell how much it meant to him. So to be able to get another shot at this, I think it's going to be really cool. And as I tweeted afterwards in my congratulations to him, the National Football League is much better with Mike McCarthy coaching in it. So it's
no
good to see him back here, and interested to see what he puts together for a staff.
Well, a couple of things that I think are pretty cool. One is that with the change that's gone on in the NFC East, that division now has 3 coaches who have been to Super Bowls, with Ron Rivera taking over Washington, Mike McCarthy taking over in Dallas, and then obviously Doug Peterson, who won a Super Bowl with Philadelphia. So suddenly there's a powerhouse lineup of coaches in the NFC East, which was, considered essentially the worst division in football in 2019. So that's very interesting. The other thing, and I had this conversation briefly with Rob Demovsky this week from ESPN, who you and I have both known for a long time. We both worked with him in previous places in our careers. How many guys get the opportunity to manage the Yankees and the Dodgers or to coach the Lakers and the Celtics? I mean, Mike McCarthy has coached the Packers, and now he's going to coach the Cowboys. I mean, this is really, really unique in history, I think.
Yeah.
It's a tribute to him and the presence that he commands and his accomplishments and the demand that there is out there for a coach of his caliber. And Jerry Jones saying he felt it was just very fortuitous that a coach like McCarthy was available at this moment for the Dallas Cowboys with where their team is. But when you think about, as you said, iconic franchises, the fact that Mike McCarthy now in his career is going to have coached the Packers and the Cowboys, I just think that's really cool.
It is. It's really cool. And it doesn't happen every day, because even some of the great coaches who have come through and have had success, 1 or 2 of those stops might not have been really seen as like high-profile jobs. I mean, these are 2 of the best, if not the best, jobs in football right now.
Yeah.
When you look at the opportunity, the resources, and obviously the history of both of those franchises. To your first point, I agree with you, too. It's very interesting to see what's happened with the NFC East.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of when Joe Gibbs came out of retirement to go back to Washington, and you had Gibbs, you had Tom Coughlin, you had Andy Reid, and then Wade Phillips, I believe, at the time was the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
That's right, yeah.
So to see kind of those powerhouse sort of coaches go in there, obviously Joe Judge is kind of unproven at this point.
Yeah, he's the new kid on the block,
right,
so to speak, yeah.
But I think there is a lot of star power there, and obviously they're trying to pull that division back up, because I think everybody can pretty much agree it was the poorest division in 2019, and they want to get it back up to what they feel is a higher level.
Yeah, and we'll see. It may not take long with those guys in charge of those franchises. All right, well, Packers-Seahawks is almost upon us here, Wes, and we do need to discuss keys to victory. I know we touched on a lot of different angles with regards to this matchup throughout the course of the week. So as far as what's it going to take for the Packers to win this game and advance to the NFC Championship, where do you start?
I'm going to start on the ground, Mike. It was the first column that I wrote this week with Inbox. It has to start on the ground. You have to get Aaron Jones going and Jamal Williams going. It's not optional this week. I just think when you look at there's so many statistics that are so similar between these two teams, except when you look at the ground games right now. Marshawn Lynch is an incredibly accomplished running back. He has some questions to answer after not playing football for the better part of the last year. Travis Homer, same thing, being a 6th-round rookie. On the other side here, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams have been the bell cow backs for this team for 3 years now. Aaron Jones had a career-defining season. Jamal Williams has played very well when he's had his opportunities as well. Packers are 7-0 this season. They are undefeated when either of those guys goes over 100 yards rushing. You need to be able to establish that to win this football game, because it's not just about the ground game. It's not just about what the weather might be like on Sunday. It's also the consideration of game management and time management. I feel like this is a game in which possessions are going to be at a premium, and you want to protect the football. If those two guys produce and do just that in protecting the football, I feel pretty strongly that the Packers stand to win this ball game.
Yeah, I have certainly no argument with that as a top priority and a key to victory. You went back to something you said at the beginning of the week, so I'm going to do the same thing. I remember sitting on my couch working on the Monday Insider Inbox right after the Seattle-Philadelphia game finished up on Sunday. And, of course, the questions are coming in. Okay, what's it going to take for the Packers to beat the Seahawks? What do they have to focus on? And I sort of just off the top of my head jokingly said, these are my ABCs, and I'm going to call them the WMCs of this game, and that's Wilson, Metcalf, and Clowney. Yeah. To me, those are the three guys that you have to focus on if you're the Packers in order to come out victorious here. With Russell Wilson, it's the obvious. You can't let him, or not necessarily can't let him, but you have to be ready for him to extend plays. You have to be ready to defend plays for 8, 9, 10, 11 seconds if that's what it takes. And you can't let him just take off and scramble for 15, 20 yards a crack, because those are back-breaking type of plays. DK Metcalf, he single-handedly almost wrecked the Philadelphia Eagles season. He had the long touchdown that gave the Eagles the two-score lead, gave the Seahawks the two-score lead over the Eagles in the second half, and then he had the big third down catch at the end of the game that salted it away. 160 yards receiving for a rookie in his first playoff game. DK Metcalf is coming into Lambeau Field riding high and with all kinds of confidence for a young player. And then you saw what Jadeveon Clowney has done in some big games for the Seahawks. We talked about the overtime win on Monday Night Football against San Francisco about a month and a half ago. And then you saw what Clowney was doing against the Philadelphia Eagles. Packers have to get this guy blocked. They have to limit his impact in the game. Those are the three guys to me that this entire game revolves around. As much as I agree with you about Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, and obviously we'd love to see Aaron Rodgers find some of his past magic and all of that we've talked about. Those are the three guys for Seattle. If we're not talking so much about those guys on Monday, then I think we're talking about a Packers victory.
Exactly, and that's the thing that's a credit to Russell Wilson. It's the reason why he's one of the absolute best from his era right now at quarterback. Is because when the chips are down and you lose players and there's injuries and you have to work through things, he finds ways to make guys stars. And I think you've seen that with DK Metcalf, a guy that was, as I've said before, was as scrutinized as any prospect as I can remember coming out. Everybody tried to pick this guy apart. John Snyder, Pete Carroll, and eventually Russell Wilson said, you know what, this guy can play football and he can help us. And I think you've seen him in certain points of this season, including that game against the Eagles, really be able to dominate. You cannot let him do that. If you eliminate those explosive plays that Philly couldn't, I think that's where things can get really difficult on Russell Wilson. Him and Tyler Lockett, Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, those are 1A and 1B in terms of where I think the attention needs to be pointed towards. The more you stop the run, the more you pressure Wilson from up front, all of that factors into making sure it's a long afternoon for him. But at any given time, he can scramble out, he can extend a play, and he can find a receiver for a deep gain. You have to plaster the coverage. You have to be on top of that. You have to make sure that the safety coverage is where you need it to be to make sure that Wilson doesn't have that avenue to escape.
Well, and I think explosive plays become such a big part of this, and all you have to do is look back at last weekend in, Wild Card Weekend. The only way the New Orleans Saints were even in that game in the first half with the Minnesota Vikings was because of one big play that they hit when Taysom Hill fired the 50-yard pass down the field. How did the Vikings end up pulling it out in overtime? The big pass down the field to Adam Thielen that the Saints couldn't stop it. It ended their season, right? I already mentioned the big plays DK Metcalf made against the Eagles in the other NFC wildcard game. Defensively, if you limit explosive plays and make teams go the hard way, make them take the long way down the field, and you've talked about this as well. The way the Packers have defended in the red zone this year, you like your chances to keep that point total low if you're not giving up the big chunks of yardage.
Yeah, and that's where, and it goes back to something Dom Capers always talked about too. The more plays you force an offense to actually go to score a touchdown, that's more opportunities to take away the football, and it's more opportunities to stop a drive if you don't have those big chunk yardage. There's a big reason why he always talked about, too, with defensive penalties and an unnecessary roughness. Those 15 yards go a long way in upping the percentage chance of that team scoring offensively.
Yep.
If you're able to not only make them go the long way, which the Packers have at times, and it's one of the reasons why I feel like their defensive backs doubled their interceptions from 7 a year ago to 14 this year, and whatever ended up being 17, 18 as an entire defense, it was making sure that they don't have those easy big play chunk yardage to set up touchdowns. And then, okay, if they do get into the red zone, how do you respond in those moments? Right. How do you defend the short field? Packers were as good as anybody in the league at that this year, especially responding to adversity defensive situations. So all that has to hold true because defensively in the red zone, Packers hold a huge advantage statistically over the Seattle Seahawks. They have to maintain that.
Yeah, if the game comes down to between the 20s and if you hold true to how you played in the regular season, the Packers definitely have the edge there. And as far as explosive plays, the last month of the season, with the exception of the first half in Detroit, when Detroit hit the Packers on a few big ones, other than that first half in Detroit, the last 4 or 5 games of the regular season, the Packers defense really did clamp down on the big plays. They weren't letting those get away from them. So before we go, we do have to talk about the other games because this is going to be one heck of a weekend of NFL football, much like last weekend was. We'll start in the AFC on Saturday night, the Tennessee Titans and Beast Mode 2 maybe in Derrick Henry. That guy is a load, man. I'm telling you, he's taking his Tennessee Titans in that ground game into Baltimore to face Lamar Jackson and that Ravens offense. What do you think of that one?
It's funny, for a game with Lamar Jackson, I actually don't think he's the number one key to victory in this. I think ultimately any chance that the Titans have to win this game depends on whether or not Derrick Henry cannot be tackled within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Right.
Because the New England Patriots couldn't do that. Despite everything that their statistics said this year and how they defended the run, they couldn't get him down within 4 or 5 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, they couldn't stop him.
And once the Titans finally just started dedicating themselves to that, even though they didn't score a bevy of points, they just were able to get the production they needed to seal that.
Yeah, and they were limiting Tom Brady's opportunities by simply ball control and pounding that run and wearing out New England's defense as the game went along.
Yeah, this is what I refer to as the Larry Johnson game plan. I just feel like this guy has to have 35, 36 carries again for the Titans to be able to win this because otherwise the Baltimore Ravens have so many different ways they can beat you. You know my feelings on the Titans defense.
Yeah.
Very strong. I like it across the board, very balanced. But Lamar Jackson stresses you in ways that no other team stresses you. And then, by the way, once you cue in on him, well, then that's when you have Mark Ingram and everything that they do with the rest of their running backs. It's a really difficult offense to stop for 4 quarters. Can the Tennessee Titans, with the structure of their offense right now, keep pace with that? It's a big question.
Yeah, I think it is a very big question. And when you talk about trying to keep pace, I think the same question arises with regards to the Houston Texans going to Arrowhead Stadium to face the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, that Kansas City offense, you know they are capable of putting up 40 plus at any given time. The Houston Texans got off to a terrible start in the wild card game. They rallied with a huge second half. They were able to stay alive with an overtime victory. What do you think here of Houston going to KC?
I think KC needs to win this game. And I know that sounds obvious because it's a chance to get to the AFC title game, but I think there's a real feeling that this is a team that has been special. They have arguably the league's most complete young passer right now when you just factor in the air raid style that Mahomes came from and how that is translated and how Andy Reid has effectively built an offense around that at the NFL level. But they need to take that next step. And to do that, they're going to have to beat the Baltimore Ravens likely. And to get that opportunity, you have to be able to take care of business against the Houston Texans. Texans were really up and down against Buffalo. I wanted to see them be a little bit more consistent in all 3 phases. They didn't do that.
Yeah, it was a very erratic game for both teams, frankly.
For both teams. But if you have that kind of erratic behavior against Kansas City, they're going to make you pay. Their defense is better this year. Their offense, I think, with Mahomes at the wheel, is as difficult to stop as any in the league. I just feel like Kansas City, they need to hold serve here. They need to be able to defend their home field and then have that matchup likely against Baltimore. And heck, if Tennessee wins, then you should run this thing all the way. But I just feel like the way that Kansas City's been built, this is their time.
Yeah, I think the AFC for a while now, and about halfway through the season when Patrick Mahomes was injured, it was really looking like New England and Baltimore was going to be the AFC championship. But then as the Patriots offense kind of fell off a cliff at the end of the year, Mahomes came back and Kansas City kind of found its mojo again. I think now for the last month or so, the AFC has been pointing to Baltimore and Kansas City playing for a spot in the Super Bowl. So I think that's where we are headed here.
And I think that's why I bring up Kansas City when I say it's their time, because the Patriots are finally out of this thing.
Yeah.
This is your gateway here. You need to go through Baltimore to do it, but there is no Tom Brady magic this offseason, or this postseason.
Postseason, yeah.
It's Baltimore and it's Kansas City. Those two teams have, through that 16-game regular season litmus test, they have defined themselves as the best teams in the AFC. You need to prove it.
Yeah. Well, the first game of divisional weekend will be the other one that has obviously the implications for the Packers. The Minnesota Vikings going on the road late Saturday afternoon. They will take on the San Francisco 49ers. We know the logistics, Wes. If the Vikings win, then the winner of Packers-Seahawks is going to be hosting the NFC Championship game. If the 49ers win, the winner of Packers-Seahawks is going to Santa Clara, California next week for the NFC Championship game. So some weird things going on in Minnesota this week. Stephon Diggs misses practice with an illness. Adam Thielen gets his ankle cut up by a cleat or something and has to have stitches. Just some weird stuff, and the Vikings are on a short week coming off of an overtime, a big emotional win. The 49ers have been sitting back. They got their guys rested. They're getting Quan Alexander back on their defense, which I think could be significant here. What do you think of this matchup? Because this, other than obviously Packers-Seahawks, which we are so focused on, this is the one to me that of the other three games that's the most intriguing.
Oh, it definitely is, because now you got the Minnesota Vikings as everybody's underdog here trying to make a run at this thing. And for as bizarre as their season has been, what else would you expect this week going into the NFC divisional playoff game in Santa Clara?
Right.
This is exactly the way this thing was going to play out for them. So for that reason, there's nothing on paper that suggests the Minnesota Vikings should win this game. For all the reasons that you just pointed out, and the fact that San Francisco is really healthy, back to being healthier. But they had no business winning last week in the Superdome, at least the outside perception.
Yeah.
So I don't know why, but anything can happen in the playoffs.
Yep.
I just feel like Mike Zimmer's team, for as high expectations they had during some of these postseason runs, I think there's just a little bit of freedom now that it's just nobody's expecting anything from us. Let's go out there and let's shove it in their face, right? So I can't wait to watch it. I think it's going to be a great game. I love the way that Kyle Shanahan plays offense. I love the way that they play to their strengths offensively. But ultimately, if you're going to pick a victor in this thing, I think it comes down to Robert Saleh's defense. And if they are able to, up front, with those 6'7" tackles right in the middle of that defense, stop Dalvin
Cook, yep.
That's the path here for the 49ers to get to an NFC title game.
Well, I think if there's any defensive coach in the league who, on a short week, can figure out something X's and O's wise to really challenge San Francisco's ground game and challenge the George Kittle matchup. You know, the word out of Minnesota is the Vikings are going to do everything they can to make Jimmy Garoppolo be the guy that wins the game. Not George Kittle, not that three-headed monster in the backfield, the way they can run it and control the ball and control the clock and all that kind of stuff. And Mike Zimmer certainly has the personnel to do it as well. You just wonder, because we've seen how creative Kyle Shanahan can be, and you know, with the 49ers now having a week off, whereas the Vikings sort of gave themselves the week off in Week 17 previously, the 49ers have had the week off. We'll see how creative they get and what counters they have for Mike Zimmer. This matchup could just be really, really interesting start to finish.
I still don't like the idea of challenging Jimmy Garoppolo to beat you. Arizona did it twice in the span of 3 weeks, and he did it both times.
But what choice do you have in a sense, though?
You don't.
But
at the same time, it's like this secondary. This is a huge moment for them.
Yeah.
And not only just because of, you know, if you want to put this on Garoppolo, it's also what do you do in the moments where Dalvin Cook does get out of the backfield, when he does get to the second level. It's a great matchup, and it is. You're right. I mean, It's a pick your poison thing with this offense, no question about it. But Jimmy Garoppolo, I think if we've learned anything about him in 2019, when it needs to be on his shoulders, he's now ready to be that guy. And he has some great weapons to do it, with George Kittle being at the front of that line. It's going to be a good game. Seeing how Zimmer attacks them defensively, it's going to be really fun to watch.
Well, the one thing I liked from what I heard is, I don't know if you saw the Mike Zimmer's post-game speech in the New Orleans. I thought for him right away to say to his guys, hey, remember a couple years ago we won a big dramatic game, which was against the Saints, the Minneapolis Miracle. He said the next week we went out and played like garbage, basically, against Philadelphia in the NFC Championship. He was reminding his guys right away, hey, let's not let that happen again. And that team is pretty, other than the quarterback, obviously, that team is in a lot of ways the same team. And Mike Zimmer's going to have his guys ready.
And for as much as people want to dog on the NFC North, man, once again, here we are in the NFC divisional round. You have two teams from that division competing here to get to the title game.
Yeah.
It's not a bad division.
Yeah, not at all. Well, we've gone a little bit overtime today, but it's the playoffs, so why not, right?
Sorry,
With
Marv.
that, we will call it a wrap on this edition and this week of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team and everything from Sunday night's big game from Lambeau Field. It'll all be there on Packers.com. You can subscribe to us, like us on iTunes and other podcast services, and all kinds of great video content is out there on the Packers YouTube channel. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.